Aaron Torres, welcome into the game in T-Town. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing really well, Ryan Fowler. How you doing, man?
Good, good. These Georgia fans, man, they're irritated. They're mad at me. They're upset.
They are. They're really mad at you. So for people who don't know, I just posted my new podcast, the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, as you mentioned. I had a couple guests on. I had to do a promotional thing on the back end. But on the front end, I talked a little bit SEC Media Days, and I figured there's no one better to call about Media Days than my guy, Ryan Fowler. And, I thought I asked a pretty innocuous, kind of harmless, innocent question about, is Georgia actually close to catching up to Bama? And I don't think that they are. That's my personal opinion. And you just went on a rant for the ages, Ryan Fowler. I don't know if you have the audio with you, but, I mean, it's unbelievable. And you got everyone on the internet fired up. I had people that aren't even Georgia fans yelling at me this morning. So kudos to you. The full interview is available on iTunes.
Yeah, let me also subscribe. Tell people to subscribe there. We'll try to work into some of the audio as we get off the conversation here. But the Georgia Bulldogs, see, that's their problem, is they think there's something they're not. And so when you come in and tell them the truth, they don't like it. They don't like to remind. Listen, how much better is Kirby Smart better than Mark Richt? Like, in your opinion, Kirby Smart's better, but I don't know if he's that much better than Mark Richt.
No, I agree. And look, I mean, he came in at a time when Florida was down. Tennessee is obviously down. The West was good. So, Ryan, I was actually thinking about this. So outside of Kirby Smart, I was thinking about this. If I told you Georgia's biggest wins over the past 10 years, I would say, winning the SEC title was a pretty big deal 2 years ago. Winning the Rose Bowl against Oklahoma and Baker Mayfield was a pretty big deal a couple of years ago. And then after that, you know what their best wins are? Close losses to Alabama in the SEC championship game last year, in the SEC championship game in 2012. In the national championship game to Alabama. Am I crazy? What am I missing from Georgia recent football history? Because I think if you go back the last decade, yes, they had an incredible run 2 seasons ago, win the SEC title in a rematch against the tractor drivers, and then they beat Oklahoma in the thriller where Oklahoma actually kind of gave that game away. And then I think you start talking about their best wins. Their best wins are close losses to Alabama. Am I crazy for saying that?
No, it's the truth. It's the truth. And I've said it, and I said it last night on your podcast, the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. If I'm a Georgia fan and I'm looking at Kirby Smart and I'm looking at, a couple of years ago he got beat by Vanderbilt the first year. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So, and that was some of the coaching mistakes. When you go back to Alabama, Georgia, this past SEC championship, some coaching mistakes. You go back when Tua was able to come in the second half, that was some coaching mistakes that got him beat that allowed Alabama to get back in that game. If I'm a Dog fan, I'm looking at Kirby Smart going, how much do you get ahead? How many times do you get a chance to put Mike Tyson on the ground, a.k.a. Nick Saban? How many times do you get a chance? Not many. You better take a chance. If you've got him on the mat, you better put your foot on his throat.
Yeah, and we see this across all sports, Ryan, is I think that windows for most teams in most sports are smaller than people think they are, right? We can go across other sports. I mean, look, the Toronto Raptors just won the NBA championship. This was their 1 year to do it. And I look at Georgia, and I do wonder. I think, something you and I talked about, you brought this up on my show last night, and I agree with you. I want to give you credit. I think Dan Mullen's in the rearview mirror West behind is going to provide a second real threat in the West behind is going to provide a second real threat in the West behind Nick Saban. Listen, I think Coach O's better than people give him credit for. I'm not saying he's on the level of Nick Saban or even Georgia right now, but the only reason I bring it up is Georgia lost a lot of puzzle pieces from last year's team, a lot of guys to the draft off their defense, a lot of wide receiver talent, their top 5 wide receivers. Georgia fans don't want to hear this. I wonder if the window for the foreseeable future has already closed and they don't realize it because Florida isn't going anywhere and Alabama isn't going anywhere under Nick Saban. And if you can't get past Bama these last 2 years, I don't know that I'm looking at this team on paper saying this is the year that they make that leap.
All right, so listen to this Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. This is just a part of the 35-minute conversation. We addressed Georgia. We went after Auburn. We talked about Alabama. We talked college football. This is the way it sounded. This is the clip that's caused the Georgia fans to give a strong reaction to this conversation. This is Aaron Torres and myself last night on the podcast.
I don't buy that they're knocking on the doorstep of Alabama, at least not this year. Yeah, what are your thoughts on them?
So let me explain, okay? When I look at Georgia, Aaron Torres. So when you look at Georgia, they're still watching it. I gotta borrow this from my friend, and I know he's a friend of yours too. Drew DeArmond up in Huntsville, Alabama. Drew always says, when you walk up to a Georgia fan, ask them if you can borrow their Herschel Walker VHS tape. Okay, because that's all they have. That's all they have. And so they pretend to be something. Oh, look at us, man. You know, we're all about championships. We're all about beating Alabama. Listen, all you have is those bushes out in your stadium,
Sure.
the hedges, and what do you have to offer me? Like sell me on Georgia tradition. Herschel Walker VHS tape. That's all you got. You don't have anything.
There it is. Torres, go ahead.
Well, and I would add this, Ryan. So I can only post those clips for a minute on Instagram. I cut out the part where you also said that Georgia is basically like Diet Pepsi. You never want Diet Pepsi if you can get the real thing, which is Bama. And then you also there was a lot of good stuff in there, so I had to cut out some of the good stuff. That the Georgia Pepsi analogy was another really good one too, where you basically said they're a diet version of Alabama, and if you're gonna drink soda, if you're gonna drink pop, just drink the real thing. Just go with Pepsi. Don't go with Diet Pepsi. I thought that was a gem as well.
Well, and let me tell you, okay, I should get my journalism card pulled for what I'm about to tell you, but I'm going to be honest with Aaron Torres, okay? Let me tell you where I got that from. We were interviewing a recruit, a major player that was looking at both Alabama and Georgia.
Okay.
He said he said in Kirby Smart, he told us this on the air. He said, and if you listen to it live, you found it. If not, we cut it out because we didn't want a 16-year-old kid to get absolutely beat down by these idiots over in Athens, okay? So
Sure.
we cut it out before we posted the podcast. And you can take my journalism card if you want to. But he told us on the air, he said, I'm sitting in Kirby Smart's office, and he said, he's sitting there telling me everything that we're doing everything like Alabama. We're doing this like Alabama. We're doing our nutrition like Alabama. We're going our strength condition like Alabama. We're doing this like Alabama. We're this like Alabama. He said, I'm sitting there, and I'm listening to Kirby Smart, and I'm going, you're telling me that you're going to be like Alabama? Well, why don't I just go down to Tuscaloosa and commit? Because if I want the real thing, go to T-Town. He said he literally convinced me to not go to Georgia and to go Alabama. Wow. It was his phrase. I just cut it out before I posted it because I didn't want to take heat. Because he's a 16-year-old kid, and I didn't want him to take the beating from those dummies over in Athens.
Well, and the one thing that you and I didn't talk about last night, and I actually didn't talk about it, I did a little opening segment myself on Georgia. The one thing that you and I didn't talk about, I thought Nick Saban's comments yesterday were really strong about, is he a tough coach to work for? And he said, yeah, maybe, but everyone leaves here and they want to do everything that we're doing exactly the same way. I thought that was a mic drop, I am the greatest that's ever done this moment from Nick Saban. And I know he had some other comments that kind of raised some eyebrows throughout the day, but I thought that was a heck of a comment. He was basically saying, these guys might think I'm tough to work for, but they all want to be like me the second that they leave. I thought that was an incredible comment for him that kind of plays into exactly what you just said, Ryan.
All right, so let me segue away from Georgia and to go to the University of Alabama. We have been debating this excuses. I don't know. I mean, if you don't want to call it excuses, excuses kind of sound negative. Rebuttals, why they lost, why they got beat out in Santa Clara. I'm just kind of curious, when you hear Nick Saban explaining all the different reasons why, do you like it? Do you dislike it? Are you neutral? What do you think?
Yeah, Ryan, until you and I spoke last night, I wasn't really – I didn't really think much of it. I mean, I do think that there's something to be said of exactly what you just said of it does seem like when Alabama takes a loss, as rare as it is, it's always somebody else's fault. Guys are focused on the NFL draft. Guys are focused on their personal brand. Assistant coaches are focused on head coaching jobs. I didn't really think much of it just because I assumed that, one, maybe it was true, or two, that Nick Saban was using it as motivation for coming into this season. It seemed like it bothered you a little bit more, but I also get it from your perspective, too, of it hasn't been too often. This was maybe the only time that I can really remember where Nick Saban just was, out-coached, out-game planned, out-prepared, out everything. And so maybe some of that does fall on his assistant coaching staff. But I also do think that part that I thought it was just a message to his team. I wasn't really bothered by it, but I think it kind of struck a chord with you a little bit.
Well, it's like everywhere we go. And I think Dabo was right. I think he said it back in the spring. He said, why does it always have to be about what Alabama did wrong? Why can it not be about what we did right?
Yep.
And I think sometimes it takes what do they say? Losing with humility. You got to be able to lose a little bit and say, hey, we got beat. And I really haven't heard a lot of us in Tuscaloosa, including myself. I'm putting myself in that category. We haven't given Clemson as much credit as we should.
100%. And, it is amazing. And look, this is just, I think, the presence of fans online. It's amazing how quickly a narrative can go one way, and there either aren't facts to back it up, or maybe there's better facts that reflect something else. And I think this is a good example. The other one that comes to mind for me, you know who I feel sorry for, Ryan? Not sorry for, but I think he gets a lot of crap that he doesn't deserve, is actually Brian Kelly up at Notre Dame. And he's been very outspoken this offseason about, in 2012 when we played Bama, they just beat us up all over the field. But, Notre Dame got smoked by Clemson in that college football playoff. And it's, Notre Dame, they're so overrated. They should have never been in the play. And it's like, maybe Clemson was that good based on what they did with Alabama. So I'm just using that as another example that it is amazing how quickly narratives kind of take off. And, I don't want to say nobody checks them. I know that, this is what we do, right? I host a radio show. I host a podcast. You talk for 4 hours a day. You got to drive conversation. You got to keep your fans engaged. But I don't know, there was something about, kind of the whole Clemson narrative that rubbed me the wrong way. One, what did Nick Saban do wrong? Two, kind of, the Notre Dame element of it as well. Sometimes we just got to say, look, I know so much of the focus all season long was on Alabama. Tua Tagovailoa should have won the Heisman Trophy. But I only bring that up to say that because so much of the focus was on Alabama, I don't think people realized how good Clemson was throughout the year. And to your point, they did prove it in Santa Clara.
You think it'll help Alabama? Do you think that revenge factor will help Alabama get to New Orleans?
Yeah, I do. I really do. I think, one, I think that, look, my thing with Clemson, and I've said this since day one, they had some generational talent on the defensive side of the football last year. I know they've recruited and developed at an elite level. I don't know that those guys are all replaceable. And so I think Clemson was way better than anybody gave them credit for. And I think Alabama, yes, having a chip on their shoulder is going to be huge for them. I wouldn't want to be Duke on, August 31st or whatever day that is. I'll tell you that much. I think that Alabama is hungry. And sometimes, look, it is hard to motivate guys that have been there 2-3 years and have won every game convincingly. And even last year, they were coming off a season in which they won a national championship the year before they beat that same Clemson team. I think sometimes a little humble pie is good. I know it's been a tough offseason for you. It's been a tough offseason for your listeners. But I also think that it can work out well in the end because I think for the first time in a long time, there's a little fire that was lit under Alabama's you-know-what over the last 6 to 8 months.
All right, Torres, I don't want to go real personal here. I don't want to expose everything, but I got to ask, man. There's a Mizra's Aaron Torres now, and that's different since the last time you and I spoke. How did the wedding go?
It went really well. It's funny. A lot of people have been asking me, how did it go? I want all the details. And it's like, honestly, she said I do. I said I do. We had some beverages. We hit the dance floor. There was literally an earthquake on my wedding night that had nothing to do with me as far as I know. I had definitely had a pretty good wedding night, but I can't take too much credit for that. But yeah, it was crazy. The Kawhi Leonard trade, which I know doesn't move the needle in Tuscaloosa, but
Who?
he's an NBA basketball player. Basketball is that thing that happens between football and spring football. He signed his contract in the middle of the wedding, so it was a little surreal, but it was a fun weekend overall. It was a pseudo destination wedding. We did it about an hour and a half outside of Los Angeles. Hung out by the pool the next day. It was a good week overall, and like I said, the most important thing was she said yes. We didn't have any runaway bride. We didn't have a runaway groom. And now I'm a married man, and I'm going on my honeymoon in August, so it's exciting.
Were you nervous?
No, I wasn't really nervous. I was more – it's weird, right? I speak for a living, and I'm comfortable speaking in front of people, but not people that I know. And, not pouring my heart out, I love you so much, blah, blah, blah. And the thing, too, was the ceremony wasn't until 6 o'clock at night, so I had kind of all day to sit around and think about it. But no, I don't think I was nervous. I think I was maybe anxious is the right word, but I wasn't nervous. Never had thoughts of jumping in the car and driving away or anything like that. We've been together a long time. So.
Well, no, I wasn't talking about that. I'm just talking about just like sweaty palms. I mean, you're sitting in the room and you're waiting to go out and you've been waiting all day. I mean, that's what I was talking about. Not running away.
Yeah. For anybody that's been married in kind of a formal thing, I think that is the most nerve-wracking part. Is it? What it really reminded me of, Ryan, honestly, was how like football coaches will say they love the noon kickoff. You just get up and go, as opposed to an 8 p.m. where you're sitting around thinking about it all day.
Sure.
That was actually my exact thought that day. I was like, man, I feel like Bill Belichick with the Sunday night kickoff. Let's just get this thing on the road here. But it was a fun week. Like I said, honeymoon's in August, so I am going to have to miss week 0 of college football. I don't know if anything's going on that week. I'll be back in time for Bama, Duke. I'll be back for that bludgeoning, that beatdown. But yeah, overall it was a good weekend, and not all that much has changed in my life. So
Aaron Torres, find him on the Twitter account. It's at Aaron_Torres on the Twitter account. Find him there, Fox Sports Radio. But if you want to check out the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, yours truly, myself, we hooked up for about 30 minutes last night, had a fun conversation. It is posted right there on the Twitter account. You can go and subscribe to it via iTunes. It is simply called the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. Subscribe, and I'm sure that you will enjoy the conversation like we enjoyed doing it last night. Aaron Torres, thank you, man, for being a part of the show. Roll Tide to you, Aaron Torres.
Thank you for having me, Ryan. Yeah, if you enjoyed the conversation between Ryan and I, go download the show. There's more of it where that came from. So thank you, Ryan.
No Roll Tide? I noticed that you didn't want to give me a Roll Tide pack. We pick up on
Roll
things.
Tide.
Okay.
Roll Tide.
Okay.
Roll Tide.
I mean, we pick up on
RTR.
stuff like that. We pick up on stuff like that, okay? I'm just making sure that you're still part of the fraternity. All right, thanks.
Do I have to do like the extended Roll Tide? I feel like Roll Tide.
No, that's good. That's good. It's perfect.
Okay.
Just we need it to come automatically next time, not hesitation.
Okay. That sounds good. I'm done. I was just promoting my stuff. You know how that goes.
Yeah, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. Go subscribe. I promise you. You will not be disappointed. I highly recommend it. Torres, thank you, man. Have a great day.
Thanks, Ryan.